At first, I just thought people couldn't financially justify hiring a clown anymore, you know? Then I started blaming the media for portraying my people as bloodthirsty murderers, cult members, or man-eating space aliens. Of course, the 2016 clown sightings didn't help. Ronald was the first to go. They just took him away. And we stayed silent. Because that's when the book appeared. What new form of clown bigotry was this, I thought? Hadn't my people suffered enough? My clown act was failing because people just weren't taking it seriously. And once they fired me from the circus, I tried suing them for funfair dismissal. My unicycle rusted, and my balls gathered dust. I used to make kids scream with laughter, you know. So much that I could see the tears of joy running down their faces. And then it just stopped. I was so upset that I started eating the banana cream pies instead of throwing them in people's faces. I gained so much weight that summer. I avoided it for a while, but the book's front cover was just so eye-catching, and it was so readily available on Amazon, that I gave in and finally read the thing. I didn't even know what the Nephilim were. Luckily, the author spent the first half of the book concisely explaining the biblical history to me in an easy-to-understand manner, so that wasn't really a problem for long. That's when I read the rest of the book and realized that being a clown is no joke. Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Coming in at Sit On Down. We have a special episode today of the Truth at Therapy Sessions, episode 65. My, how the time has flown. But yes, people, we have hit 70,000 subscribers as of last night. I woke up this morning to just, I think, about 100 over that, so I just missed the thing tick over. But that is incredible, and I cannot thank enough all the people who have joined just in the last month or two alone. It has been insane how quickly this channel is growing. And just to put it into perspective, on the 11th of August, so only 21 days ago, I think now, I was on 60,000. That's 10,000 people in 21 days have joined this channel. So this is unprecedented for me. It's humbling. It definitely comes with a lot of pressure and responsibility, but I think I'm doing it right, and I hope you guys can agree with me on this. And I'm trying my best to use this platform as it should be used, obviously, to point people towards Jesus, towards God, and the truth in all of that. Even if people don't necessarily always agree with me on my eschatology or end times perspectives, but I do believe I'm doing my best to keep the gospel pure and to point to the truth that if you want to understand the conspiracy, you need to understand who Jesus is. So that's fundamentally why people are here. But also, I do have to give credit where credit is due. Many of you have joined my channel because you watched a particular video about parasites. And now that was actually the first time I've actually ever discussed that topic on this channel after 10 years. It's a topic that I have been wanting to discuss for a while. And I got a guest on, Vitaly, from Alpha Talks, and I had Joe as well from JT Follows JC join me to kind of co-host the event. And Vitaly was really the one who created the presentation and just simply presented it on my platform, and I was just there to add idiot commentary from my naive viewpoint as best I possibly could. And many of you subscribed to me based off of that video, but really you should go and subscribe to Alpha Talks YouTube channel and Vitaly, because he is the man discussing the parasite, and he's writing a book on the topic, and also how the gut is heavily involved with this too. And just to celebrate this event, and we'll get into it, I think we should maybe talk about this video a bit more. I actually have Joe with me from JC Follows JC, who helped co-host that. Joe, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, man. Well, congrats on 70,000. That's huge. I was thinking about it when I first started talking to you. I can't remember how many subs you had, but I distinctly remember earlier in the year when you were celebrating 30,000. So that was just the same year. So do you remember where you were at the first of the year?
Maybe you're right, something about that. I mean, when I actually came back to YouTube, I guess it's a year and a half, 2 years ago now. At the start of 2023 is when I came back. I was on about 10,000, something like that,
Wow.
just to gain some
Yeah,
perspective
that's
there.
that's impressive.
Yeah, so but again, a lot of subscribers have joined recently because of this Parasite video, and it is something I'm getting Vitali back on the 5th, and he's going to do his second presentation, which he's working on. He's very excited. We were just talking to him. He's making a PowerPoint for that. He has more to share. It goes deeper about the connection between demons and parasites, and it might actually be good to talk now just about the reaction that I got from that, because that video is up to something like, I think it's like 330,000 views now. I that is
Yeah,
the
that's crazy.
That's stupid amount of people. That's like a stupid amount of views, and I think my only other video I have which comes close is something like 220,000, which is one of my Nephilim Look Like Clowns episodes about the Rakshasa demons. I think that went viral and got kind of
Hmm.
reached that level. But this is just taken people's imaginations by storm. It's like no one's ever. Many people haven't even considered the idea that there are so many parallels to what biblical descriptions of demons are and the behavior of parasites. And I think I want to kind of set the record straight that I I know the thumbnail is dramatic, demons are parasites, you know what I mean? And I've got these
Yeah.
images, but realistically, we're not really saying, let's throw out all we know about demons in the Bible. Parasites are demons, full stop. That's all you need to think about from now on. It was only ever talking about tiny microscopic beings in your body. That's not what we meant.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people took it before watching the video and kind of knee-jerk reaction saying demons are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. This is stupid. This is leading people astray. And it's kind of, I got quite a lot of that coming from it. I think I want to just set the record straight. It's kind of like, no, what we were kind of saying is, well, there are these odd parallels between the two. Could it be that parasites are somehow involved with the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the demons, in some way, and are used perhaps as a conduit or a method to get into people's bodies, like spiritually speaking? Is that kind of what you took from the presentation? Because I don't know. I mean, what did you think of the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's what Vitali was saying too, was that it's kind of like that. If I couldn't possess this person, I could maybe possess this small organism, and then this small organism can get inside him and can cause him all kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we don't believe that the microscopic organisms are literally demons, but they could be a conduits to that,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes sense. I mean, I think that actually. Well, I mean, yeah. Why couldn't if the demons in the Bible could possess the pigs? Well, I mean, if it's a spirit, I mean, we don't know what at what microbic level could they possess something. They could obviously possess something very big,
Mm-hmm.
something very little. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like to me, yeah, there's obviously people going to judge your video before especially the ones who don't even watch it.
Well,
They already got opinion on your thumbnail, and but when you listen to it, it makes sense. It kind of, and you're kind of the perfect guy with this too, because you have the Nephilim look like clowns, and I remember even myself when I first heard that sounds like what? But then when you actually hear it explained, it's like it's not crazy at all. It makes perfect sense. In the same way, I think that yeah, parasites are demons. Yeah, right. It's the same thing.
right. Yeah, it's just like at first it's like, nah, we have good
Mm-hmm.
parasites too, there's some good bacteria in our gut. I get all these kind of responses. It's like, just watch the damn video, is what I'm saying. Just listen to
Yeah.
the points first. We know what you've just said is the case. We're not completely devoid of like intelligence all of a sudden because of one clickbaity thumbnail, which clearly I think the thumbnail won for that video. I think that's what did it, to be honest, because or maybe it is just a hot button topic right now. Are people really, really just looking for like parasite cleanse solutions, or it seems to be a trend, doesn't it? Is that what people are thinking about? Holistic health, parasites, the relation to the spirit realm. It just seems like we tapped a nerve without realizing. I did not think it would go viral. I mean, the video that went viral is literally like an hour segment of a 2-hour podcast we did months ago. It was like a month and a half before the fact, and I just needed a video for the day because I haven't got anything. I was like, I'll just cut the hour presentation out of that podcast I did, whatever. And I'll slap a few extra images on just to make our point clear, and I'll take the thumbnail for that podcast and just invert the colors, so I'll give it a white background instead of a black one. And just honestly, no thought really went into it other than what I just said there, and I just chucked it out. And then a week later, it's like, what is going on? I'm sending you guys images over text. I'm like, are you seeing this? Like, this is insane. And I feel bad because Vitaly should have got all that attention, not me. Like, he put all the work into that. Like, what did we do? We quoted a few movies and the references here and there. You know what I mean? That guy was.
I do what I always do. Yeah, I draw it back to some movie reference. But I mean, yeah. But at the same time, it's like I mean that's kind of social media for you though, because you really don't know. I mean, I know that all of us who make content, our favorite videos are rarely the most successful ones. You look back and you're like, I don't know why that one succeeded and this other one didn't. I mean, I guess it kind of is like a roll of the dice, and who knows? Obviously God can do something and promote you, and ultimately that's like we're all friends and we do podcasts together. I always think like what a rising tide raises all ships. So you're doing good.
I agree. It all kind of works
win-win
together in tandem, doesn't it? I mean, you yourself are doing quite well. You have reasons to celebrate because you have a massive following already on Instagram, don't you? Is it Instagram?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started making reels on TikTok, and then so I saw the writing on the wall there. I was going to get banned, and so I started to focus on Instagram. Did get banned on TikTok, and after that, I was focusing on Facebook and Instagram. Meanwhile, I was trying to transition into like podcasting, making movies and stuff. So yeah, I remember thinking because TikTok, the follows come very easy. I mean, I don't know how easy they come, but I mean, it comes really fast, almost like how you're blowing up now. A lot of us went from 3 followers to 100,000 in like a couple months. And we're like, oh gosh. And so a lot of us thinking we're going to do the same thing on YouTube. And then it wasn't like that. So, but now finally things are kind of, trying to get, I'm pretty happy with the growth, because I do feel like that the one thing I appreciate about YouTube versus some of these other apps is the engagement's good. And, I'm sure, like you have the people who watch your videos who I see in the live chat, and I see them in my live chats, and I said, the community's awesome over here.
Mm-hmm.
And, the numbers are nice because I feel like that sometimes that's a reflection of the hard work that people don't see that often. And so like you want to see the numbers, but you always have to remind yourself that you didn't probably get into it because you thought you'd have 100,000 subs one day, and I'm sure you will, and Lord willing, that, it's going that direction. I do think it's cool though, because I think we're all getting better at it too. I mean,
I've only literally just started adding words to my thumbnails about 8 months ago or something like that. But my wife was distraught. It's like, how have you got people watching your videos when your thumbnail is just terrible? Like, you don't put any
thumbnail game is terrible.
And then she taught me the art of the drop shadow, and I've gone wild with the drop shadow technique on Photoshop, and everything's just drop shadowed now. And I've been experimenting with thumbnails, and that's slowly been getting better over the last year. But yeah, it took me like 10 years to even put any effort at all into presentation. And I think, like I said, I'm slowly getting better, and I think it's paying off in some way. But I anticipated to get banned like years ago. I did not, and my channel got a lot of strikes back in the day. Like that hot time in 2016, the 2018 period, when everything was just incredibly contentious and you couldn't even breathe without like the censors coming after you and the ban hammer coming down. I was on the verge of just about to be getting removed. All my videos were going red all of a sudden, and just instantly taken off because of offensive content, and it's like, really, what did I even do?
You know, that's interesting. You said that if it was 2016 was like a hot button year, and so what did you have? You know, what did we have in America in 2016? We had a very big election, and then I recently started getting in trouble on Instagram, and I've never got, I really have never gotten in trouble, and just recently, and it's like, okay, so what's changed? Well, now it's 2024, and we have another big election, and obviously everybody knows in 2020 how many people got banned in that year.
Yeah,
So
purge of 2020. Yeah, I remember.
So you're starting to notice a pattern here. American elections, yeah, people, yeah, censorship obviously increases.
Yeah. Well, like I said, in 2018, I actually went underground and stopped posting on YouTube and hid all my videos and just got on with life for 5 years, managing a supermarket. You know, I wasn't like in the game because like everyone knows the story is following me. I got forced off, you know, because my boss found the channel and it was just a big mess. It's kind of like, are you going to get fired if you keep doing this? It was just one of those situations. And in a way, I'm thinking maybe that was God removing me from the situation before it got really bad.
Right.
And now I'm back. And it's going well, and I'm smarter, wiser. There's things you should say, things you shouldn't say. You've got to play a bit of a game if you want to get some longevity on YouTube, you know. And like I'm fortunate enough that it seems to only just now, after 10 years, seem to have paid off. So if people want to ask me for advice on how do you make a successful YouTube channel, I haven't got a clue. I have no idea. Like, you just get lucky one day if the algorithm gods decide to bless you somehow for some arbitrary reason, and it'll be the thing you didn't even put any effort into that somehow does it for you somehow. One day, maybe, if you're lucky, perhaps, but don't count on it. That's the best advice I've got for YouTube. Like, but you seem to do really well at the short content game.
Well, that's how I learned how to make videos. I mean, I learned, actually my videos were a little bit longer at the beginning, but TikTok you could only make a video but so long, and then now people are putting on really long videos on TikTok, and I'm like, I don't want to watch your long video on TikTok. I want, like, I'll watch long videos on YouTube all day long, but I ain't watching a 10-minute TikTok. I don't care if it's on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking over, like, you're just kind of scrolling over to see how long this video is. Like, oh my gosh. So I make videos like that on these social media apps, like my attention span. I want get to the point, make it, like, show people, stop telling everybody, like, just don't. You want to see things visually, and yeah, you make it kind of like easily digestible for people who don't know much about this topic. You can give them 60 to 90 seconds, and that's enough. Because I mean, you think people like click away so quick. I mean, there's so many options now.
Absolutely.
And no, but I think the one thing I noticed.
I've got a question. Just your audience age range. Do you get told on Instagram in the short form what age bracket people are viewing your content in? Do you get shown?
Let me see. I can. We can just look it up real quick.
Just for context, I have nobody under the age of 18 watching my videos. 0%. Nobody on 0%. YouTube under the age of 18 watches my content. Like,
their parents probably won't let them watch that weird Nephilim cloud
maybe
stuff.
But you know when I was a teenager, you watch whatever you want, you know. It's kind of, I mean, 18 is still an adult in England. We class it as an adult, you know. You're 18 years old.
So I have on mine is, so out of 95,000 followers on Instagram, I have 0.3% 13 to 17, and I have 5% 18 to 24. 21%, 25 to 34. Biggest demographic is 35 to 44.
Same for me.
Yeah. So, I mean,
yeah.
About, I got 52% men, like 48% women.
Yeah, that's about my split. And isn't it odd that our, like, age bracket is generally tends to be older people? Maybe that's
no. I don't think so, because I think that just because it's obviously I'm this age, and I think that, like, would I have cared about this when I was 18 years old? No. I would not really care about the symbolism and everything. I really wouldn't want to see past the things I'm told. And it makes sense to me. Like, yeah, the people who start to, like, wake up a little bit have, like, lived a little bit, and they're like, dang, I don't trust these people anymore. So then start watching videos about exposing stuff, and then they continue to watch them. Yeah. So those are the kind of people who, you know, they're like us.
Oh yeah. Well, I think what was I? I was 20. would have been 22 roundabout when I first started, even just, when that moment, the end of the world, 2012 stuff was happening, and I was like, what's going on here? And then that's when it began, and that's when I fell into the hole, and started spiraling down. So yeah, again, prior to that, I mean, I don't think I was even consciously aware that I existed at 18 when I really think about it. Like, you don't, do you? You're just in that weird nebulous form of hormones, ideas, concepts, philosophies, just trying to understand who you are and where you're thinking about yourself a lot at that age, and you're not really thinking much externally. And then you hit like like mid-20s rolls in, your knees start to wake a little bit, the mortality hits you hard in the face. It's like, oh, I'm decaying now. I'm no longer immortal, And then I think you start to kind of think a little bit more. And then once you hit my age, like early 30s now, this is all I care about. It's kind of like, I have to know the truth. I've got to know what's going on. I need context for my reality. I don't want to be lied to. I've got more conservative in my life. Everything just starts to go that way. So I suppose the demographic makes sense, doesn't it, when you really think about it?
Yeah, you have to. It's funny, even biblically, like the people that God used, they were generally older, and isn't it interesting in the Bible? There's a reverence for elders, not like now. And of course, like you said, you think if we're in Satan's little season, devil's running this place, like old white guys or like those are the last people you want to listen to. Like, what would they know? They've only lived their whole lives. I mean, not just saying like white people, but what I'm saying, like that. Don't listen to old people. This is a young person's world, so there's this rebellious spirit when you really think about it, like that. I don't know how much you've thought back and you're like, man, some people gave me some good advice a long time ago and I kind of remember it now, but I didn't really know why it was good advice. It's almost kind of like the difference between knowing and understanding. And unfortunately we have to, like, experience has to be our teacher. And you have to make a bunch of stupid mistakes. And so, yeah, like people who have lived a little bit, been humbled, those people obviously are much wiser for it. And I think that I'm a good example of that. That like I had an idea and I thought I knew a lot, and then I realized, like, man, maybe I knew I was so sure of things. The problem was I was wrong about lots of those things, and then you kind of start to peel back the onion. And then you start to learn more. Yeah. And now you're like, okay, so now I'm not so sure either, like, which obviously bothers some people when we start speculating about things, and they want us to be sure about things, but I'm not going to be somebody else for them, because I think that as we've learned more, because we have said, well, I'm not sure, but I'm going to continue to research this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, the stuff we've been talking about, again, with no degree of 100% certainty, but we're talking about the little season concept. It's making waves in a big way now.
I think so too. I kind of feel like we're only still experiencing like a very small part of that, because I think it's only as you get bigger, you obviously are going to have bigger people taking shots at you.
Whatever, bring it. I'm not bothered.
Right? No, I'm not saying you should stop, but I'm just saying, like, that I feel like that we are, at this point, we are kind of really fleshing it out. Mm-hmm. And so we are obviously going to get more sure about certain things. Certain things we'll never know for sure. But yeah, as we do, I think that, again, like, certain people, we're going to get in somebody's, crosshairs about this stuff.
I'll take a bullet or two for the team, but I can't take them all. I need everybody else to start taking a few more. I think I may have taken one or two from some smaller channels here and there. And, I don't... They tend to just be angry and taking little cheap shots here and there and not really have anything to bring to the table that's I haven't already considered necessarily. I just tend to ignore them. It's like, well, a lot of the arguments is kind of like, I'm sick of it. I've heard it my entire life. You're not saying anything groundbreaking or new here. Like, all we're saying is, yes, that stuff you've just said, but what if that's not where we are? You know what I mean? And it's kind of, could you consider the possibility that even though all that stuff is true, it may have already happened, perhaps? And it's kind of like, no, I can't consider that. That's wrong. It's just, we can't even think about it. And it's kind of like,
yeah.
And the common one I get a lot is kind of loving, condescending tones. And it's kind of like, are you sure you want to be talking about this? You know you'll have to give an account for every word, right? You know, like you
Right.
don't want to.
Like they won't.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to be caught leading people astray, do you? What if you're wrong? It's like I'm wrong about everything. I'm always wrong about stuff. That's never stopped me talking about things. Like
Yeah.
that's what thinking is, and letting yourself be wrong. Like having the bravery and the audacity to say, well, what if what I believe was wrong? Let's question these things. Let's look into it. Let's just think about these things for a second. And it's kind of like my entire like conspiracy theory journey has been me being proved wrong about my beliefs. And it's kind of lately seems like, okay, maybe we're not waiting for tribulation to come upon us. Maybe it's already happened, and that is me humbling myself and saying maybe I was wrong about something. But it's kind of people aren't seeing it from that perspective. They're seeing it as you must be a deceiver out there looking to mislead people away. You want them to take the mark of the beast. So it's kind of what a two-dimensional take. It's kind of what a really don't caricature me like that, like I'm some cartoon character who doesn't have the ability to think for myself. It's kind of, but that's the overall attitude. And again, right now it's small channels, but I think big channels are going to start getting
I think
annoyed,
that I think this is my thought process on it, because I've dealt with haters for ever since I started making videos. And there's certain people you respond to, and there's certain people you call out by name, but there's certain people that obviously you don't want to elevate. And I think that we're probably at the point, especially like guys like a guy like me, maybe on different apps, I might be more of a target. But some people probably would say, well, he's too small. I don't even want to mention his name, because if I do, it'll help him. More people will know what he's talking about. So they'll kind of take. I saw like the Good Fight Ministries. They did a video about preterism. Of course, that's how they just label it, because they don't mention Satan's little season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing about like what we were saying is like that we've had to consider if this could be true. And it's like I don't think that they've ever considered that preterism or the little season could be true, because they've already, it's like they've already made their mind up that it's wrong. And so now I'm just going to try to find evidence to prove it wrong. And then when you listen to them, it's really pretty flimsy, like their case. And it's like they don't really ever go against the strongest arguments. And when they do, they twist themselves into pretzels to make sense of their worldview now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really when it comes down to it, like that. I think they probably find us dangerous because so we've gone to the place where we believe this is likely true, more true than the futurism position.
Yeah.
I know what they believe now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can, and I think that's why I'm probably like certain people don't want to talk to me about it, because I know exactly what they think. Cause I thought that exact same way. And it just, there's something wrong with the idea that if it's never even been talked about in church, this time when Satan deceives the nations. And it's like, how does he do it? I think that that's a thought process worth considering.
Mm-hmm.
That how would he do it?
I watched your video. Why don't we talk about 70 AD? I was listening to that today, actually. Like I was just doing some housework and it was on in the background. And you said at one point, it's kind of like you went to like Christian schools your entire life.
Yeah.
You were raised in Christian schools, you know what I mean? And you graduated from a Christian college and all these type of things. And no one ever talked about 70 AD or the Jewish wars ever. They never talked about them. Like not once were they brought up ever. No. And this is Christian history, is it not? Like this is like pure history. What happened after Christ? What happened? And there's a huge Roman Jewish war, and the temple was destroyed. It's like, why did nobody ever tell me that? And I just listened to you talk about it. I thought it was
it's funny too. It's just like the whole thing with like Nero and the fiddle. Like you hear about that from like in school somewhat, that Nero supposedly was fiddling or playing a lyre when Rome was burning, and he blamed the Christians for some reason. I think that's weird. I think it's weird that we don't as Christians, like the Western world is Christian, for the most part, less so every day, but it is Christian. So like, why don't we know more about why Nero hated the Christians so much? You really think about how small of a sect it would be in this massive empire that the Romans had. Like, why would they care? And I think that's what I'm saying. Like I'm curious and I'm skeptical about things, and I want things to make sense. I think it's weird that that war's never talked about. I think it's weird. We're never really taught more about the persecution of the early church. Like, why would anyone care about what the early church did? You know,
Mm.
I think in my mind, I used to think, well, because it's true. Okay, but why? But why would they hate people who like, like you think about the Book of Acts, and these people are like literally just feeding the poor. They got this community, and they're being real good, and like the apostles are writing letters like submit to the authorities who you're under, and if you get beat for doing something good, then praise God. Like these people seem like they would make good citizens. So why would you feed them to lions? Right?
Something was going
Right?
on that we're
Like,
not being told. Yeah, I mean, it's an odd view to take. Like I said, that Jesus says, render unto Caesar what's his. Just
yeah, pay
yeah.
your taxes, submit to the authorities. Even Jesus, when he's going, like Paul, his trials, he's like appealing to the legal process. He's not fighting. Nobody's calling for revolution, but yet there's obviously there's certain Jews that were stirring up people against them. So that's said in the Book of Acts, but that's basically all we're ever told.
Mm-hmm.
And then meanwhile you have this massive persecution of the early church. Literally, the temple's destroyed, all of Jerusalem's destroyed, and then yada yada yada, the whole world becomes Christian, yada yada yada. We're here now, and you know what I mean, like, and we're still waiting for something, and we're not really sure when it's going to happen.
2,000 years later, nothing. Here we are, just still waiting for Christ to return. Apparently,
Well, I mean, there was like 1,000 years. It was real boring and dark. Don't even try to look into that. We don't even talk about that.
There's nothing. You don't want to know about that. Forget about that.
Well, so I actually had a really good comment today. Let's see if I can find it. And it was along those lines of like, so why aren't we told about 70 AD? And I made this point. Well, I don't even need to read it. It's basically, I made the point of, okay, so if Daniel is not about 70 AD, okay, if the things Jesus said was not about 70 AD, who prophesied about 70 AD? You know what I mean? Like, so which one of God's prophets was talking about literally 1.1 million Jews dying in this war, God's holy city being destroyed, the temple being destroyed, and then the sacrificial covenant ending? There was no prophecy about that. Right? It's like, so like literally we're waiting for, because Daniel's about a third temple, even though it's not. So, what I'm saying? Like, what was more significant to the Jewish people than 70 AD?
Mm-hmm.
And that was not prophesied by any of the Old Testament prophets. So if it wasn't Daniel, if Daniel wasn't talking about that, then who was? And I think that
Jesus said it with his own words.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It makes way more sense that Daniel was talking about 70 AD, and so was Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And
because other than that, even I was reading it. So I just finished the Old Testament, and I started Matthew the other day. So in Malachi, it mentions that Elijah has to come first before the awesome day of the Lord comes. Well, he's talking about something. He says, and it says, and when Elijah comes, he will turn the fathers to their children and their children's hearts to their fathers. And it said, lest God strike the land with the curse of destruction. So it's kind of like, so if you think about it, Jesus tells the apostles, if you can accept it, John the Baptist was Elijah. And so John the Baptist is literally quoting from stuff about like making the road straight. He's prophesying like Elijah. And he's saying that, he even tells the Pharisees, who warns you of the destruction to come, or the wrath to come, the judgment? And so what we know is those people did not turn to God during that time. So lest God strike the land with a curse of destruction, it happened. You know what I mean? Like, so what else are we to conclude by that? That it happened. That's what Malachi was talking about.
Mm-hmm. But there's also like other historical kind of like you're saying, why wasn't it documented about the destruction of the temple if Revelation was supposed to be written in like 90 AD or something, like we're told? like historians like to say, and it's kind of like because it was like more likely written just before the temple was destroyed, and it's kind of obviously just Josephus talks about it, doesn't he? Flavius Josephus afterwards, and he describes like chariots of fire and soldiers in heaven. It's kind of like...
there's a star that resembles a sword over Jerusalem. There's a comet that lasts a whole year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about signs in the there's signs in the heavens. There's literally like an angelic army in the clouds. I mean, it's hard for me to even say that without actually just like, it's hard to believe that, but that's what they wrote. He wrote that. Tacitus wrote that.
That's what Josephus says. He says,
yeah, that's what they both wrote, that there was angels in the clouds.
But even he says, I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't actually have seen it. Like, he even writes just below his witness account, it's like, it's so fantastical if it wasn't witnessed by thousands of people and myself included. It's kind of like, yeah, this happened. Like, and I can't believe I'm writing it down as so. Like, it's that type of thing. But again, it's kind of like, I think you were describing, it's kind of like, their stories are saying, well, you know, it must have been written after 70 AD, or these prophecies, because Jesus' prophecy was just too accurate about the destruction of the temple. Like, you know what I mean? So,
and that's what the skeptics are saying.
Yeah.
So in the same way that, so the skeptics are nervous when they find out that no, these were written before that, because then what do you do with that? And so then the modern church is saying they don't even want to, like, that's what I'm pounding on the table saying, see, I told you it's true. And then the people in the pews and on Sunday mornings, they don't even talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to give Jesus credit for being that accurate. The Daniel was that accurate, you know? And that's why I said it only makes sense. And I said, I asked my buddy Matt about this, and I said, so why isn't it written in the Bible about, like, why isn't there a historical kind of book to kind of put in there? Maybe before Revelation, if you think it happened before. Just to say, wow, Jesus was crazy accurate about this, showing all the destruction of it in the same way that you get accounts from this in like Jeremiah. You could put a book in there, or at least a couple chapters about that. And so my buddy Matt had a great answer. He said, because it hadn't happened yet. That's the only good reason why the apostles wouldn't have wrote about it, because it hadn't happened yet. And maybe John died sometime around 70 AD. Maybe he got the revelation. You know, a lot of people believe he got the revelation maybe around 65 AD. And so maybe he died somewhere around there. Whatever, he was too busy to write about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like something was going on that he could not write about it.
Well, no. John's still alive today.
He's just hanging around. Otherwise, no, but there's no good reason why they wouldn't have wrote about it. And like my friend said, it would be like writing a history of New York City and not talking about September 11th.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to talk about that. Actually, but it's even crazier than that, because it's not, obviously New York City didn't stop being New York City after that, but literally Jerusalem became like a Roman outpost for a long, I don't even know. Like I said, I haven't even looked into like the history afterwards, but that place was like razed to the ground. It was wiped off the map, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The whole nation was gone at that point. And like, I think that's like a thing of, well, okay, so let's just say those people don't believe that was Matthew 24 happening, or the book of Revelation, or anything like that. It's kind of almost like they don't trust us enough to come to that conclusion, so they have to hide it from us, you know, or maybe not hide, but it's kind of like, yeah, they always talk about like fake news. News can be fake, not because it's all wrong. It's because they choose not to report about certain important things too. You know, they overemphasize certain stories and then they bury the other ones. So when you bury that, I think that's a big deal. Because like I said, I'm sure that the regular churchgoers, they don't know anything about 70 AD. And even the ones who do, they have no idea that Josephus said there were soldiers in the clouds. No. I know none of them know that.
No.
Because if they did, they would at least have to start to, maybe they have to reevaluate what they think they believe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe now's the time. Maybe this is what's going on. I don't know. It just feel like with information everywhere now, because of the internet, it's easier to find this stuff, you know. And in the past, people did just rely on what was told to them by their pastor at the front of the church, and
Mm-hmm.
the book was always read to them. But now, with like every translation that's ever been in existence available at your fingertips, with programs there to search keywords and everything, it's kind of, I think views like we're talking about are, it's just going to get more and more popular. I don't think this is going away now, and I think the old guard, the old system, cracks are showing, and people are panicking. I think a lot of established people are panicking now, especially like the big churches, the online end times ministries are all panicking as well, I think. And it's kind of,
they're not panicking because they think the world's going to end. It's because their website is looking kind of silly now.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put them, because I'm not saying they're not on fire for God. I'm not saying they're not saved. I'm not saying they don't believe in Jesus and his promise and salvation. Yeah. I'm not saying that. But what you just said there, I do get a little bit like, it seems a bit tacky now when I see stuff like that, or I see people doing the end time spiel, or look at the signs of tribulation upon us stuff. There's like a inner... What is it? The new generation say ick? Is that the word? There's like I don't feel good saying that. Yeah, it's like a bit of like a cringe factor to it. You know what I mean? It's kind of...
No, I feel the same way, because now I'm just like when I was making end times videos, it would have to be kind of a big story that came up. Sometimes I would be like, oh, I haven't made a video in like in a few days about this or whatever, and I could maybe reach a little bit for a story, but typically I would be like, I'd want it to be like, I was making videos about other things. But when that's all you do, every headline is an end times headline.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you really like, when you're really trying, that's all your content. Yeah, sometimes you're just like, okay, so that's the end time. You have people like, some of these channels. So there was a really bad day in the stock market, was it like a couple weeks ago? And it's almost like these people are like gloating about it. And of course, I'm like thinking, dang, it's a bad day for me. I don't think that the world's going to end, but I mean, I'm really kind of annoyed that you guys are gleeful about it. Oh, I guess Jesus come back. No, I mean, it is sort of a weird thing to people be like, I get it. They're hoping Jesus comes back, but first the tribulation comes. Like trying to kind of get excited about the tribulation. That's not really ever how the Bible was ever like. The Bible didn't ever say, well, get excited when you see all the real bad stuff happen. It's like, no, you look up because your redemption draws nigh. But like, that's really like at the very last minute.
No, well, you've actually been covering this just recently with Vitalia at Alpha Talks. You have him on your channel. There's a video you're about to drop. Did you decide on a day in the end?
Yeah, I think it's coming out Tuesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time in America. It's basically, it's going to be called 536, the day of the Lord. Yeah. So in year 536, this is like the start of the Dark Ages. It's like kind of the end of the unofficial or the official end of the Roman Empire. Mm-hmm. Ends with all these dramatic signs in the heavens, like cataclysms, like earth-shaking events, like literally. And it's pretty dynamic when you actually, again, like, we're not taught about this. Mm-hmm. Why not? I was thinking it was kind of funny that when you start to go back into history and you really start to research certain topics, I think we take for granted that we got the Bible, but this event supposedly, again, if you believe these timelines, which again we question, was supposedly 500 years after Jesus died. Right? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of history about it. Literally we have secular historians and scientists trying to prove kind of what happened during this time, but we have very small little, descriptions from a bishop here, a senator here. Meanwhile, it's like, this is a worldwide event. There was 18 months of darkness. There was famines, there was plague, there was war. Literally think about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Mm-hmm. They were all riding in year 536. Mm-hmm. And there's very little written about it. And so I think but the more you dig into the history, that's like, again, that's what they talk about, the Dark Ages. It feels like there's a blind spot in our history, and it seems intentional.
Well, to describe like these people today who are excited about tribulation, like can't wait for it to come on Jesus quick. It's kind of like, okay, you want to go through tribulation, do you? You want to see that? You want that? Oh, let's talk about 536 then. The closest thing we can imagine to what it would be like to perhaps go through a tribulation. And like I said, I watched just a quick. I skipped through. I got like 30 minutes into the video you shared on Instagram as like a sneak peek. And I've heard a lot of it before, but it's kind of you touched on a lot of extra stuff there. I wasn't thinking about, and you speculate quite a lot. But it's kind of that was brutal. Like that time period, you do not want to live through that. You do not want to live through anything akin to what a tribulation would be. And it's kind of like those who are gleefully waiting for every sign to prove that tribulation is about to come upon and people are about to get, punished for their sins in a sense. It's that kind of attitude, isn't it? It's kind of like, what are you, a death cult? Like, they're supposed to be followers of Christ. You're supposed to wish that nobody ends up in that situation, but it's kind of, they say that type of thing, repent now, we don't, be saved and all this type of stuff, but they have this duality about them. It's kind of like, I can't wait for tribulation to come. But like I said, your video, like, what happened in that time period, and what we're saying is, maybe this is a part of the tribulation, maybe this was it, this could be it. We do have a time in history that's, the parallels are uncanny. How does Vitaly say? Something like, how many coincidences do you need to have happen before it stops being a coincidence? It's kind of like
it's a pattern. It's a pattern. Well, the thing I touched on, especially in the beginning of the video, is, and I know you mentioned that at some point, and I think this is something that people need to wrap their minds around. We think of the day of the Lord as one day, or this is how a lot of us have believed it to be. It's one day.
Yeah.
Well, there's a day of the Lord every time he comes in judgment. So I believe that the day of the Lord is specifically talking about certain events. And I think that in our minds, we've projected that out to a future time. Like a lot of us obviously were futurists before. So we were thinking the day of the Lord is coming when he returns after, this whatever mystery Babylon gets judged and all the things. But if you read your Bible, I was saying, like, here's a good example of this. In Ezekiel chapter 30, it talks about the judgment on Egypt. And God says that he's going to send his destroyer, Nebuchadnezzar, to hand out this judgment to Egypt. Okay, so that happened, right? Like that's a past event now. This is not a future judgment on Egypt. This is literally God is using Nebuchadnezzar to go to different places and destroy them. Take them into captivity, ruin, like some certain nations, obviously they're never nations again after Nebuchadnezzar comes. And so the signs are the same. But if you read in the Bible, it's like, what happens on the day of the Lord? Signs in the heavens, all the things happen afterwards. Okay, so there's your good example of this. And the thing was crazy, and I started to notice this just recently. The books of the Bible in the Old Testament, with the differentiation between the major prophets and the minor prophets, it makes the books be out of chronological order, because you put the major prophets first, but they're all kind of prophesying about the specific time of the Babylonian captivity coming, right? But I started to realize that, so right after Daniel, you get to Hosea and Amos, and it says what kings they served under, and it was before Hezekiah. So I remember, like, okay, as Isaiah is dealing with Hezekiah a lot. And I was like, okay, so these books should actually be before Isaiah. And then when you actually read what they're talking about, they're prophesying about the day of the Lord coming to Israel. Well, that came too because they were prophesying about Assyria coming to take them into captivity.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, there's been many days of the Lord already.
Mm-hmm.
And you can almost say like that we have been taught about like kind of a ball earth. And when the world ends, like literally it's the world, the ball's on fire, it's destroyed or whatever. But biblically, the world has ended before.
Mm-hmm.
Worlds end, new ages begin, people rebuild. Obviously, biblically, God destroyed the earth with a flood. We know that the lane was probably still there when the water was over it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not hyperbolic to say the world ended when only 8 people are left.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to rebuild all of civilization. So in the same way that if God says it sends a judgment on this place and he says like basically the world's going to end, it does for those people. Like that's not hyperbolic to say that the world ended for Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Mm-hmm.
For those people, it did. So in the same way, there's a judgment on Jerusalem. Later, the beast is judged separately, not at the same time. I think that even like us in this futurist or the little season view, we believe there was a judgment on Jerusalem in 70 AD, but Rome did not fall that same day. They fell later. And I think that this is kind of like the more murky parts of our history. We're trying to tie that. And it's like when you see when it fell, which again, Rome is the fourth beast in the book of Daniel, the last one. Well, this is the end of it. And it coincides with all these crazy signs in the heavens, like plague. Half the population died of plague of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about like on that kind of a level, darkness, plague, like winters that last for years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that. I just think it's crazy to think that if you are a Christian, you believe in a sovereign God. So our God's not connected to this. This is just random chance. Mm-hmm. Like that's what the secular historians are trying to tell us. Oh, it was just a volcano. Okay, so who controls the volcanoes in your worldview? It's just random. Well, that was a bad time. It's almost kind of like was God not paying attention to what's happening in the world that time, or was this specific to his plan?
I think they say, don't they? Was it Krakatoa? Is that the one?
Well, they were
a blanket of ash, which then
there was older videos. Yeah, they were trying to say that it was likely it was some kind of super volcano that shot all kinds of sulfur and ash into the air, blocked out the sun. But you got to think about it. They were saying that like this was like for 18 months. So now they're saying it could be a combination of a volcano in somewhere in the South Pacific, also in Iceland, maybe even North America at the same time. The point is like, okay, let's just say
the odds of that happening all at once.
Right. Well, I mean, if every volcano in the world just shot off at one time, that sounds like an act of God to me. Mm-hmm. That sounds almost like the book of Revelation. So to people who don't believe in a sovereign God, they would just say it was, that was bad luck. Bad luck to be alive in that time because you probably didn't last. It's likely you didn't last if you were around in that time. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's with a biblical worldview, it's crazy because I think it's funny because a lot of times the people who don't believe we're in the short season, they will really question, well, when did this happen? When did this happen? And I'm like, and you guys, when you guys watch the podcast, that's we're going to be like, remember when you asked that question? Well, it seems like it happened here. And it might have happened in that question you had about this other thing, it might have happened here. Mm-hmm. And this thing might have happened here. And the only thing that kind of would maybe give people a reason to have cognitive dissonance about this whole subject was 536. Well, that wasn't close to the first century. Mm-hmm. Was it or wasn't it? Again, because the details are murky in these times. Like we don't even really know when these things were.
Yeah, they might say it happened in 536, but it could have happened in, I don't know, 90 AD. Let's just throw a number out there. It could have actually happened then, and historically they've just said, oh, it happened at this time. And even then, people say, well, what about the church fathers? It's kind of like they weren't saying Christ was reigning. They weren't saying that the millennial reign had come. They weren't saying it, so it can't have happened because they're assuming it all happened in 70 AD. It's kind of like, well, no, the church fathers during that time period wouldn't have said anything had happened yet because it hadn't happened yet. Then you look at 536, suddenly tribulation seems to have come upon everything after the church fathers. And then you don't, and then, well, I don't know.
Well, you even have, it's again, like, because it's hard to find like really good information about a lot of these times. You have some of the early church fathers. Do you ever see like when they found their writings?
No.
It's not like they were preserved this whole time. They like, oh, well, shoot, we found a book from just name a church father, and you say like, oh, we found it like within the past couple hundred years. In the same way, I just found this out. Of course, I was talking to my buddy Matt again, and he was saying that, Josephus's writings, they weren't discovered until like 1100 AD. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these accounts are found later. So why is there's this separation of this stuff? Like, I was always taught that the Romans were really good at writing stuff down, mm-hmm. Having history, but history again, it's really vague, in a lot of accounts. And that's what I was saying to Vitaly. I said, imagine, let's just say this is not 536. What if this was the day after the temple was destroyed? That the sun went dark for 18 months?
Mm-hmm. It could be. It could be.
It literally could be. You know, what's funny about the whole thing about the volcano, Pompeii, the city of Pompeii was destroyed by a volcano in 79 AD.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty close to this. And it's described as a very corrupt city, mm-hmm. like a Sodom and Gomorrah like city. Very, debauchery, depraved people. So this place gets burned by fire and sulfur, like Sodom and Gomorrah did. Mm-hmm. And let's just say that was the volcano that went off. And that's when all these things happen. And if all these things would have happened in the first century, like literally the same decade that Jerusalem was destroyed, and everyone knew that, how many more people would be on our side of the street saying, yeah, that already happened?
Well, just alluding here, it seems like it was a two-part judgment, the day of the Lord. First, the whore of Babylon was judged, which is Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of Babylon was judged not long after. It seems like God came for that judgment first to his own people who rejected him, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And then it came upon the rest of the world not long afterwards. But it wasn't all like a all-at-once event, as so we've been told. And obviously our history, they've spread time out or something. They've done something to the historical record to make us believe, well, there was 500 years before anything even close to something like a tribulation may have happened. Even then, you're lucky if you discovered that about 536. You have to really go out there and look for it to know that that even happened in 536. And it's kind of like, it's hard to hide fully because there's like dating methods, like dendrochronology is what I think you bring it up, don't you? It's like, even
the tree rings.
You look at the tree rings. That year is consistently bad for the tree. None of them, like they all had a bad year during that one time. It's kind of, but even
all those 2,000-year-old trees they chopped down to find this out.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
That's what I mean. Like I was saying, could you even imagine if you had in your town this tree that everyone was real proud of because it was super old, and then you had some scientists come in there with an axe. And you're, hey, what are you guys doing? Well, we're gonna do some science. We're gonna chop this tree down. We want to check the rings inside. We're gonna count them. We want to see if it was really bad 1,500 years ago. People would be like, they'd be chaining themselves to the tree. They would not let anyone do that.
Yeah,
and for good reason. It's almost, to me, it's like, again, it's like, is this trust me, bro science where, oh yeah, we cut it. Don't worry. We found an old tree. It was totally away from everyone else. We checked the rings. It was totally 536.
Well, this is what
I mean, can you imagine even trying to looking at a tree ring that had that many rings and you're literally trying to count into where the middle of it is, where you're seeing like the little bad spot? Mm-hmm. 2,000, you have to at least 1,500 rings.
Mm-hmm. If a tree's made it that far, you're not cutting it down. Like it's a big but there are images, aren't there? Those old images I remember back in the day, and you see, I think was it No Forest on Flat Earth video. I remember that guy, and a great video. Clearly shows our history's a lie. It's one of those early videos, isn't it? That shows okay, so what we're being told here is way off. And you see, he has all these pictures of like men in like suits just stood on top of giant tree stumps where they've just cut down enormous trees. People were just cutting down enormous trees during some kind of weird 1800 period for some reason.
They were doing so many weird things in that time.
It was an odd time, wasn't it? Yeah, well, I wonder what was going on during that time. And now I think we're having more answers. Yeah, it's part of the big cover-up, isn't it? We need to kind of, trust me, bro, I know the history. Like, these people wrote the books that we're calling history. These people are changing our landscapes so we can't find the evidence of our history. These are people claiming, oh yeah, we built those. These are the people who are like destroying everything. And it's funny because you were talking about volcanoes in your own video. I think Vitaly at some point, like 20 minutes in, says, well, people say volcanoes aren't even real, we don't even know what.
Well, I was saying that because I watched Ceiling Fan Man. He had a guy on and they were saying, the volcanoes aren't real. And that's not to say that volcanoes aren't real. It's just the way they're presented is not real.
I've got a take on it. I've got a take on that. I don't think you.
Go ahead.
I don't think you mentioned it, but the No Forest guy in that video, he explains what volcanoes are, and he says during this time where something happened, because he believes the whole Earth has basically just been absolutely excavated and demolished. Like all the giant trees have just been removed and cut down. and it looks like the whole Earth is just one giant mining plantation. And what
Mm-hmm.
he's saying is all the slag and the waste just got piled up into mounds everywhere on these enormous dig sites. And he's saying what can happen when you get all these waste products piled together, even in like modern like dumps and stuff like this. The chemical reactions start happening and they start spewing fire. And he's saying
Wow.
what volcanoes are. It's not like hot magma from this core of the earth shooting up and coming out, bursting like a pimple on the earth or something. It has nothing to. It's just basically an instant chemical reaction happening within the mound, just erupting out of the side of it, and that's what they actually are. It's nothing to do with just because.
That's pretty.
Yeah,
That's pretty funny.
So,
There's
yeah.
where I live. It's really interesting that it's like the flattest place on earth almost, and we have a mountain here, but it's called Mount Trashmore, and so literally it used to just be a garbage dump, and then at one point they covered it with dirt and they turned it into a park. And there was these famous shock jocks, like local guys, and on April Fools, they said it exploded. But I mean, I think that there's like a real danger that, yeah, with packing down all that garbage and, what happens to it after these chemicals start to interact with each other. Mm-hmm. Like there was a real risk that could happen.
Oh, yeah.
And people believed it. Of course, obviously everyone was freaking out. I think the one guy got suspended.
But imagine that fired. On like, we're talking like,
yeah,
a mass giant scale, just a huge pile of dirt and just waste product from mining the earth. Just dump it over there, and then you can see like surrounding these volcanoes is just like hollowed out canyons everywhere, and it's kind of like that's all it is. You're just looking at the remains of a waste site that's been left behind after it was just mined of all of its valuable resources, and you're just now walking around on the moss that's grown on top of it, and you call it a forest. You know what I mean? It's kind of what was actually there with these enormous trees, like absolutely mind-bogglingly large, beautiful mushrooms and trees and fauna, and it's just been decimated, and we're living in like the waste of it now. Now, I don't know if 100% if he's right on that. I think he may be talking about a really ancient time here. And because I don't know,
it could be like the days of the Noah days,
maybe something like that. But I just thought that explanation for volcano, because Vitaly says like volcanoes weren't even mentioned in the history books till like 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Kind of.
Well, that's the funny thing again. Like, so this is what I noticed about history and science. They're very similar in the way that they're very confident about things that you can tell, like that if you actually continue to ask them questions, they're taking a lot of leaps to get to these conclusions, because they're when they were talking about Krakatoa specifically, well, actually anywhere, so they're saying like that there was a volcano did this. There's no proof of that. There's none. What they'll say is there's ice core samples again. There's tree ring samples. Well, the point is that the earth went cold, so the tree rings don't prove it was a volcano. It just proved that there was, what the historical account said, that there was winter times that lasted for like a couple years, because it was like 35 degrees or one point, I forgot whatever the Celsius. it was that much colder. So it was, like the crops were ruined, and obviously crops were ruined. Trees are not growing during this period. So yeah, if you could chop down a tree, I believe that you probably could see where there was a bad time. But then they say there's ice core samples. Point being is like that they really do treat people like they're idiots back in the day. Like they wouldn't have known what a volcano was. Like the point is they don't even describe anything that's remotely similar to that. There's people all again, they took an account from Indonesia, and this is crazy if you guys haven't heard this. Literally, there's an account where there was a guy describes great storm, the whole world went dark, thunder, lightning, earthquake. And then when they woke up the next day, this island was split in half. And they're like, well, that must have been Krakatoa. And it's like, but he didn't describe anything that was volcanic like. They're saying, well, that must have been this. They even were talking about like that in China, they heard a giant bang one time. And they said, well, that must have been, and it was supposedly 3,000 miles away from Krakatoa. Well, that was enough for them to say, Yeah, probably Krakatoa. Even though they couldn't even date when any of the stuff happened. And so it's kind of like a trust me, bro situation where that people are comfortable saying it was a volcano, but all the mythologies, which again, I don't think the mythologies means they're not true. There's all these superstitions, if you want to call them, of these evil deities blocking out the sun. And when the sun was blocked out, wicked things happen, like the end of the world. And I said, the funny part about it is now you know why. Like biblically, that's what happens when the sun goes dark. When the moon turns to blood, the lights in the sky don't give their light anymore. God's judgment is about to happen. So in the mythologies of like the Egyptians, they had a being called Apip, or I think in the Greek he called him Apophis. He's this serpent that swallows the sun disk, and so he's always this. He's like the nemesis of Ra, their sun god. So he's always trying to kill Ra, and Ra's always battling him. Ra always wins, except for there's a part of the mythology that one day he doesn't win, and then what happens? The end of the world for the Egyptians. Do you think that could have happened when Nebuchadnezzar came? Ooh, there's Apophis Apep just swallowed up Ra, and then all of a sudden this army comes.
Mm-hmm.
A battle they can't win.
The signs are kind of cyclical. When the day of the Lord comes, it'll always look the same in a way, and that's the only real sign you need to look out for. Like I think were you saying it as something like, if the sun suddenly went out now for like 18 months, I'll be on TikTok and Twitter saying, I think judgment's about to come, guys. I think this is it.
We weren't saying 18. That was the funny thing I said, because Vitaly was like, if the sun stopped showing for a week, he's like, people would be saying the end of the world, and I said, I would be one of those guys. I would be making TikTok saying the end is nigh. Again, in the short season view, it'd be like if the sun stopped showing, yeah, everyone would be freaking out. It's like you're not superstitious if you're worried that the sun's not giving its light anymore. Like literally, you can't see your shadow at noon.
Mm-hmm.
They said like it's like a sun in eclipse all the time. Yeah, because what happens is it's cold, which nobody really likes the cold that much, and then obviously the crops are ruined, and then people are weakened, and that begets sickness and all the kind of things that go along with that.
Which is what.
And the crazy part is
36 onwards, right? That's what.
Right,
happens,
and the crazy part about it too is there's still war going on during this time. Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's why I'm saying like that sounds exactly like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And to go back to something you said about, yeah, I think that there's a lot of people because they believe a 7-year tribulation. And I said, I don't think that that's really biblical. I think that there's a 70-week thing in Daniel. That's about Israel. That's about Jerusalem. There's 70 weeks, 490 years about atonement. And then obviously the Messiah comes during this time. But yeah, in the book of Revelation, it's never described. It mentions that the whore of Babylon is destroyed in a day. But it does not mention that. It mentions after that, you have the Battle of Armageddon is later. So that happens afterwards. It doesn't really give you a timeline. Mm-hmm. It mentions that the Gentiles are given 42 months to trample on the holy city, which mm-hmm. again, the Jewish-Roman war is 42 months. In the book of Daniel, it mentions 1,290 days. Mm-hmm. That's 42 months. So those are your real time markers of how long things need to go. But I say that, so scripture, prophecy seems cyclical. You have shadows of future prophecies that are going to come. So in the same way that if God used Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon to judge Judah and Jerusalem in the first place, and Egypt and some of these other nations, Babylon didn't fall right away. So in the same way that when somebody say, well, Rome didn't fall right away. Well, maybe it didn't. But again, I think it's funny that so many secular historians argue within hundreds of years when Rome actually fell. So like, we don't really know how it fell. We just know that it did. Mm-hmm. Some people would say that it hasn't, and I kind of give them a little credit because there's a lot of weird things about the Roman Empire. But point being is, God decided it was going to fall at some point. Maybe this is still part of like the times of the Gentiles where the gospel, people are still getting saved. Maybe God is is holding his judgment until it's time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Peter says, and I think that this is often probably misinterpreted scripture. It's 2 Peter 3:8 when he said, "Remember this important thing, that a day to the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day." And so people are like, so futurists would say, "Well, it really hasn't been that long; it's been soon." But what he means is, he says, God is not slow to fulfill his promises. He's patient, wishing that no one would perish, but they would all repent. And I think so, like, that's God's timing, is like that he has a reason why he's going to hold off on the day of the Lord till something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. So yeah, those kind of things. If God says something's going to happen in a certain time frame, it will. But if he doesn't say exactly when, it could be longer. And like I said, again, or the timelines are stretched out and these things were more connected than we know.
Well, I'm leaning more towards that. Some manipulation of dating of events has gone on. We know about Joseph Scaliger. Kind of his chronology is what we base our history on today, from the and that was in the 1600s when that was all written. He was a Jesuit priest, if you want to go on to that as well, but let's not talk about that. It's kind of, but we do base a lot of our chronology on his chronology, and Fomenko wasn't happy with that. The Russian historian, he's like, "Why have we done this? Why is our history all written by these random Jesuit priests from Europe? Like, what? I don't." And he did his own chronology based on maths, and timings of events and and the calendars, and he's like, he thinks 1,000 years has been added to our timeline. And that was his conclusion. And it's kind of like, well, what would the motive for doing such a thing be? And the only evidence I've found which convinced me that something like that seems to have gone on is not only the odd coin dating manipulations with the J's and the ones and people editing ones to J's in later iterations on buildings, but this 536 event is almost identical to the plague event of the 1300s. It's practically the same event. Like, if you want to look at the descriptors of what went down, and it's kind of like, and they're supposed to be separated by about 800 years or 770 years or something like that. Are we sure that they're separated, or are we perhaps describing the same event? And then this might explain the whole medieval Jesus thing, where Jesus is in a lot of medieval artwork, walking and talking with people, quite literally dressed in medieval clothing. And it's kind of like, is that what people were wearing and actually living in buildings like that when Christ was around? And he wasn't in some barren desert somewhere in like the Middle East necessarily. It's kind of things were a lot different visually than we've been made to believe through the modern movie industry today, or wearing dusty robes and sandals. Or maybe he was wearing tunics and doublets and actually looks incredibly like wealthy, and maybe it was a very different image and this is the kind of odd manipulations we're seeing. But you look at the plague event and this 536 event, it's the same thing. Masses of death, the sun going out. Like, if people think the plague was just about an illness, and it's like, when you actually look into that event, it was horrific. It was it was more than just illness. Like, it was everything else in between. It's kind of, oh, well, maybe that's the European account of the same judgment that was happening in these other accounts from 536. It's kind of just viewpoints and different takes on the same event, And
what was it? I saw this show. It was called Heliosorcery. Have you ever seen that? It was going around the YouTube circuit for a little bit.
It rings a bell. I don't think I saw it. I think I saw the thumbnail.
It was about it was kind of a flatter type movie, but it was kind of more presented in the way that, like, how we came up with this heliocentric model. And at one point they talked about, like, like this kind of conspiracy of like the Jesuits, and they were saying that when the Bible was interpreted into like the layman's tongue, they couldn't stop it. There was a time where the Catholic Church was really trying to crack down. They were like literally burning people at the stake for, printing the Bible in a language that people could understand. So then obviously it takes the power away from the church. And so there was this man, I forget the guy's name, but he was basically saying we have to combat learning with learning. And so that's when they tried to say that you can't really read the Bible like that because a lot of it's allegory, and then we're going to have to explain what some of the stuff means. And it's like, so you still need me to interpret it for you, even though you can read it. And so you wonder if those same people were doing that with the Bible, what would they do with history?
Mm-hmm.
And and I was just thinking about it while you're saying that, about like these events being the same. And we're often taught that the Dark Ages, the one of the reasons they were dark, because people didn't write down all the stuff that was happening. Well, what if they did? And it's like, it's not a lot. There would be more written, where it would seem more like a great historical account if it was a shorter time period. But when it's stretched out over 1,000 years, you're just like, you can imagine somebody who was like really not nefarious. They were really looking into history, and they were like, like somebody who dedicated their life to being an historian. And they're like, man, I can hardly find anything about these dates. This must have been a dark age,
Mm-hmm.
because I can't find anything credible about this. So he's actually, people are actually really trying to look into history. But again, if you did add that much time, and we don't even know if it was 1,000 years, maybe it's 800 years. Some people say 500 years. If they did that, yeah, obviously it would look like there's a lot less history, and it doesn't match up with that amount of time.
Well, I think Fomenko was saying we're actually in like the year like 1,100 and something right now. Like it's not like it has been, like I said, from 70 AD, the 1,000 year thing had happened, and we're not in the year 2024 or something like that. And what the biblical events happened not that long ago is what he was trying to say. Like it was actually very, very close to us in history. I don't know if he goes on the whole tribulation has already happened thing. I don't think he even considered that, but he does show the discrepancies. It's like this, nothing adds up. Like I think he, as a mathematician trying to make sense of it, is kind of like, I think even he struggled, but he can say one thing's for certain, because I think he was using like astronomical signs and events and timings and everything to make it. It says it's not the time period they're telling us that we're living in. Like we're not in that time that they say we're in right now. Like, and he say someone, it has to have been stretched out, is what he's trying to say. Like, well, make a dark age happen, that would just magically invent a dark age, then, wouldn't it? All of a sudden.
Well, I thought one of the best cases of like really we have good evidence that they're lying to us was in that Lost History of Flat Earth, when they were talking about the maps. And so, yeah, like you have the tropics, you have the Tropic of Cancer, you have the Tropic of Capricorn. And so what we're taught is that those, they were given their designations, obviously that's based on the zodiac, Capricorn and Cancer. And it's about the precession of the zodiac and the age we're in. So that was designated in the age of Aries, which what we're taught is that was right before Jesus came. I think it's kind of funny to think about like an age is ending as Jesus is there, right? And then they enter the age of Pisces. Okay. Well, so when they entered into a new zodiac age, the maps would have changed, because we're told the reason they use those at all is because of celestial navigation. So if you got lost in the sea, you'd be able to look up at the sky, and you'd be able to, based on where you are in the ages, know where you can, you're looking at the Polaris and all the other constellations, you could find where you're going. But we're told that they wouldn't even be that concerned about it until 1492. So by the time 1492 comes around, or you see the maps of like the 1500s, they still say the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. So why? So you're thinking these people would not have been, because we're taught that these are the people who would specifically needed to navigate based on the stars. So why would they have not updated the maps? So the maps are either old or they're fake. There's something wrong with the maps, because otherwise there's no reason why because what we're told is that we're either in the age of Aquarius now, or we're about to enter into it. So that means there would be no accurate maps with the right tropics in all of the age of Pisces, when exactly is when you would have needed it, because that's when people were doing these transcontinental journeys and ships and, circumnavigating the globe and all that stuff. But they don't have it.
So yeah, it changes everything.
So why not?
Exactly.
So why not?
I was just looking up quickly while we were talking. The Great Fire of Alexandria, which destroyed supposedly the library and the entire histories and all these type of things. And I'm looking into when did that happen? And I'm looking into this, and it's kind of no one even knows specifically when that actually happened. It turns out it's kind of like, according to Livy, who lived during 59 BCE to 17 AD, 40,000 scrolls were destroyed. Although Roman historian Cassius, from 155 to 235, merely mentions that storehouses of some books burned down. It's kind of like, so the historical record is not as cut and dry and agreed upon as people think, is what I'm trying to say here. What we go off is what people from a long time ago, or not even that, people from recently have said what people from a long time ago said about what they thought that happened from a long time ago. It's what he said situation. And like I said, we find books today, like, or in like 1100, that are supposedly written by somebody who maybe lived around the 1st century, and he's talking about events that supposedly happened hundreds of years prior to himself from his accounts. Where is truth there when you really start to think about how much can you trust that an accurate account was really made when it comes to just man saying what some other man has said? And it seems like the Bible does feel a little bit more stand apart because there's like a consistency to it. And this is what this is the thing about, I think, is why we're always encouraged as Christians, look, just focus, go back to the Bible. It'll tell you what the truth of the situation was. As I said, we have our record up to supposedly 70 AD, right? Don't we? 98. That's when the book ends. That's when scripture ends. And even that's odd in its own right when you think about it. But then we have what we have now, but what people have said about it afterwards. Like, let's say Josephus is just the one primary example of what did the church fathers say? What did these men say after these facts? And we can't trust a word of it because even they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know they're just referencing older accounts of people who are saying something right. And people have agendas. Winners of wars write history. And I think there's like that famous quote, which is supposed to have been said by thousands of different people. You can't pin it down, but it's kind of like history is just a set of lies agreed upon. That seems to be, and I can believe that. And it's kind of, so I have to get these arguments thrown at me when I'm talking about this thing. Well, what about this event? Or what about that event? Or so if Christ has reigned for 1,000 years, when did that happen? It's kind of with that smug attitude. It's kind of like, well, do you trust the history you've been taught? Do you trust the narrative, the timeline you've been given? Like, why do you trust it? And it's kind of like they've never actually stopped to think about where the history has come from. They don't actually think about who wrote the history. Like, what are the sources for that thing you've been told about that happened at that specific date? Do you actually know, like, who came? Like, they don't. They implicitly have trusted what they were told in school. And this is why I'm surprised there aren't more conspiracy theorists open to this little season idea as much as I thought there would be. It's like, why do you suddenly now trust the record? Why do you suddenly now like? Why don't you believe men have lied? Is what I'm trying to say here.
Well, I mean, there's obviously challenged a lot of their worldview, and like I get it because I was right there where I thought if my hope right now is the potential return of Jesus within, like, I don't know, like, between 2030, a lot of people were predicting those kind of days. And yeah, I did feel like I need something very solid to move off of that position. And I don't think I was wrong to, as I feel like that I'm a skeptical person when it comes to lots of things, including conspiracy theories. And some people get mad at me because, like, oh, you still think that's real? I said, no, I don't know that I think that that's real. I'm saying that I don't trust your BS theory yet. You're going to have to prove, like, that's what I need more evidence of. So, but I feel like that it's crazy to me that when you actually do start to, go behind the curtain, you see the Wizard of Oz back there. You're like, man, I thought that science and history was like this rock solid, just science, so like that when you, like, before you looked into the moon landing and all those kind of things, you just trusted that they sent rockets up there. They were playing golf on the moon. They were doing all the things. Because why would you think that they were lying? Well, because you never looked. And the same way that you have all this history, which it again, it blows my mind that when I start trying to research history on my own, yeah, that you get these very vague accounts, and like you have a guy who told the guy this, and then when you hear like stories like Atlantis, oh, that's just a myth. That's as solid as any other history thing we're reading. That's solid as stuff from like 500 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Is this guy from Egypt told this Greek guy, and this Greek guy told everybody else about this place that was destroyed by a giant flood. It's literally, I mean, that's what history is.
Mm-hmm.
Even that's the funny thing when they try to discredit the Bible, they'll say like, oh well, the Gospels written far after, like Jesus lived or something. Yeah, well, the first historical account of like Alexander the Great was like 400 or 500 years after he was dead. So they didn't have any biographies about him until later, that much later. Okay, so now you start to see when you compare apples to apples in history. That's why I said the Bible's very impressive of how old it is.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're talking about stuff from like the times of Moses, which is makes it easy for some people to say, well, they didn't exist. It's like, well, how do you know anybody existed then?
Yeah, they don't hold the same standards up to their own history, do they? Exactly.
No, they'll say Jesus didn't exist, and you're like, okay, so if that's a wild conspiracy theory, because there's secular historians don't deny that he lived.
No.
So again, it's also kind of weird that the whole world shifted.
Jesus is just a symbol for the sun. Jesus was just a symbol. He wasn't real. He was just a metaphor for consciousness. Right. And the oil that goes up the spine. All the crazy Gnostic stuff starts coming out, and they always get. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying? Jesus didn't physically walk around and wasn't witnessed by thousands of people in multiple accounts, and then literally sparked a religion that continued into the modern day and dominated the earth. Like, oh yeah, no, he didn't exist. It's kind of, no, that's ridiculous. That's like
right.
There is no more evidence that somebody existed for any other historical figure, but you trust that they existed. And there's actually, like I said, no historian denies that Jesus existed.
No,
there's
no credible
evidence. Too much evidence. It's like more than any other historical figure that's ever existed. Like, it's kind of, yeah, if anything's true, AD, the year of our Lord, like,
yeah,
if he was there, it happened. Like, that happened. Like, it's undeniable. And for then these idiots to say like, no, he was just a rip-off of an old sun god. He was just a symbolic idea to represent seasons or something. It's kind of, how can you get to that?
I mean, and in some ways, I can kind of like, maybe now the more I'm looking into history, I think that if you don't want to believe, you can just throw it all out. That's what I'm saying, because I would say that in general, history is just garbage, and it's just like it really is. It's like, it's in the same way that you're gonna have to trust NASA about things that are a billion light years away. Like something that happened 1,000 years ago, and there's like one guy told the guy this, and this other guy's telling me that's the truth. It's like, well, how do I know that's true?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the news is fake now, obviously we can easily verify that lots of it is. And then how could I trust anything that happened during World War II? Like how could I trust any book about something that I've never really witnessed? I mean, it's like, you can't really. You obviously have to use based on what you know to be true, and you judge it based on that. But I think that we are in a place where you really have to be careful with what you're not skeptical about. I mean, I think that is question everything. Question everything. I mean, even like I said, I question the Bible of how true it was at times. I don't question it anymore because I know that it's true. I think it continues to prove that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like some people just don't know why they believe the things they do. And because if they were honest with themselves, they believe the things because they were told it's true.
Mm-hmm. It's funny,
but they haven't researched it on their own.
I think you've used this example a few times, and I was just talking to somebody called John LeBon. He has a podcast, the JLB podcast, this thing called Bonversations, and I was talking with him, and I did my thing about the clowns, and he asked me loads of questions about the little season as well, and he was really interested in a lot of these just stuff I've been talking about. And then I said, you should come on my podcast, and share your ideas. He says, I think people think what I talk about is insane, is what he says. And he's explained, I don't think like dinosaurs are real. I don't think this and that. And he's saying these things. And I was like saying, to be honest, it's pretty boilerplate stuff. You're not as crazy as you think you are. And I think you talked about dinosaurs in the past, haven't you? It's kind of
Yeah, a bunch of
the
times.
story is stupid. What they've
Yeah, it's just
told
dumb.
us, like what they've told us about dinosaurs. And yeah, sure, dragons clearly did exist. Look at
Mhm.
medieval artwork; they're everywhere. And I don't think they were just metaphors or symbols for stuff. They were literally spearing dragons out of caves. Like they were wrestling with these things constantly. So yeah, I think there's a precedent to say big lizards existed of some kind or
Yeah.
something like that. But you look at like the narrative they've given us of billions and millions, millions and millions of years ago. These through different factions of millions of year segments, and we can tell because of the layers of sediment rock we dig through and find the levels of bones. These giant lizards walked around, but the narrative's off. So now they're not giant lizards anymore. Now the giant chicken reptilian hybrid bird feather
Right.
monsters or
They're
something.
not.
like
They're not
that.
even reptiles anymore, which makes the name nonsensical. Because if they were,
Yeah.
if it's a Greek word for terrible lizard or monstrous lizard, you just said it's a bird now.
Yeah.
So how much do you really know about it?
Well, exactly. There's this funny meme I found. It shows a drawing of like a medieval dragon. It says like medieval bullshit next to it. And then
I saw that.
and then it goes to like 90, like 18 something. It shows the dinosaur and how they've drawn it with these little arms in front. And then it shows the evolution of that dinosaur evolving with each like generation of how it looked. And then they've gone full circle and now they've depicted it exactly how the medieval dragons were depicted. It says no,
Yes,
and it's kind
I
of
did
like,
see that.
it's no longer medieval bullshit anymore. Like that's actually, it's kind of well, yeah. So it wasn't that long ago, and it's kind of the throwing onto us that millions and millions of years ago narrative, or this narrative that the U.S. president can call the astronauts to tell them good luck while they're out in space. You know what I mean?
They can live stream. I mean, they were literally
Yeah.
what they're showing is they were live streaming from the moon in 1969.
I can barely live stream from my office here. And I have good internet speed. Even I have latency issues all the time and get a few frame rates dropped and it starts to lag. They were pristine, weren't they? They had no problems whatsoever.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny too is like a lot of people who would like question or question us about like the biblical cosmology, and they'll still trust a lot of. Well, what about satellites? You wouldn't even be able to have the internet if it wasn't for blah blah blah. And you're like, do you know that they have like pipes that literally go under the sea?
Yeah.
And this is actually all connected with wires.
Yeah.
And that's why we have good internet in places like this, and you and I can talk from across the ocean.
They don't know.
There's no wire connecting from the moon. So like you're literally expecting them to get this signal back, this crisp signal, and talking on a telephone and also getting video at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 1969.
Do people remember what a dial-up modem was like?
Right, it was such garbage back.
Do you remember waiting half an hour for a
literally
website to load? Like I remember.
They literally say that like this, the computing power in this was so much more advanced than what they had on the Apollo 11 rocket.
Well, no, a calculator had more technology right. from what I remember. Like just one of our modern calculators. Yeah, the story's ridiculous. Like when you really just start to like, not just, and they're just two narratives they've told us: dinosaurs, you know, the moon landings, and these. But they throw a lot of them as evolution. Yeah, another good example. These big they're big lies, aren't they? Like if you're gonna lie, go big, and that's what they've done basically. And I think there's something psychological about that. It's kind of like, how could they lie about something like that? It's that kind of response, isn't it? It's like it's too big. It's just too big of a lie. You know, they couldn't. No, people would know. It's kind of like you're putting a lot of trust.
Some people do.
Some people do. Yeah, but you're putting a lot of faith that the people that work for these organizations aren't just also being lied to. Like you assume, like they might have believed that live feed was real. The people who turning the dials in some of them might have actually believed they were really getting a live feed. You know,
I forgot who was talking about this, but they were some of my friends who really look into this a lot. They were saying that at NASA they do a lot of these like test runs where it's like they don't even know when they're doing a real one or not because they do so many of them that are actually just simulations. So then you think about it, like that actually makes sense of why they wouldn't actually know what was actually happening. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's just staring in front of their own little screen and they got their big headphones on and just, and then they're, hey, everyone, it says applause now, clap. We're on the moon. I mean, everybody saw that Indian moonlander thing, and obviously it was done like Atari graphics from like the 80s. And then later they say, oh well, it was never meant to be like a live video. And I'm like, well, why don't they have live video? Like it was so funny. Again, I saw something where they were showing like the best images we've ever seen of the moon, and it was like supposedly some kind of either satellite or some kind of super high powered telescope. And I was like looking at it, and of course, some people in the question, where's the flag at? I'm like, that's not the question. It's like, this is AI. In the same way that I can take my Samsung Galaxy 21, and for a while I was like, it would take a picture. I could zoom into the moon, and I would get this crisp picture of the moon. And I used to think like, why can't I use that same zoom to see things on the land? If I could get all the way to the moon, get clarity of the moon. Yeah. So then you find out later, oh, it's got a little AI thing in there that it gives you a nice crisp image of the moon. So why couldn't we turn one of our satellites, or take one of the telescopes that fly around the whole galaxy and record them landing something on the moon? Why not? Like, why can't we? Well, conveniently, I think it was in India and also China. They landed on the dark side of the moon.
Oh, China. It was China, wasn't it? I think.
Just like the Dark Ages, there ain't nothing to see on the dark side of the moon. Don't worry, trust us, we did it.
Well, with no light pollution, they should have got a better view of the whole universe than anyone else on the dark side.
They should have got a great view of the stars, right?
Yeah, as someone who's done night photography, no light pollution is a godsend if you want to get good like star photography. Like, less light, the better. Go to the darkest place you can find, and you'll get a brilliant view of the stars. So the dark side of the moon, it's like, why are there no stars in any pictures taken from the moon?
Because it would have been hard to Photoshop them.
Oh, well,
and if they did, people would have been able to line up constantly, because that's the thing about our stars. Again, this only makes sense in a biblical cosmology, or it makes sense where we have like a stationary plane, is that the stars remain constant to each other.
Mm-hmm.
The stars do move, but they move in relation to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why if you could find a couple stars, somebody could figure it out if they were faking it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the real question a lot of people always come down to is like, so why would they lie about certain things? Because they're like, you have certain lies that hang the whole system on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, like the dinosaurs. So why would they lie about that? Because if you teach evolution to people, you have to have some kind of a thing that goes way back. Because if you don't have something that goes way back, then you can't really explain any of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to explain where things started, at least, or that. I guess that's not even the start, but I mean, they have to have something to hang evolution on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, then you get into the NASA stuff, and it's like, well, why would they lie about that? Because they need to show some kind of result for you to trust them about all the other things you'll never see. And that's why they would lie about that. And then, of course, then you get into history, and it's like, why would they lie about that? It's like, because they want us to be little cogs in this satanic machine that we just churn out widgets all day long, and we don't question them.
I like that.
So like if we're taught that there's days of the Lord that come, and civilization literally gets upended, and there's evidence of it since the times of the prophets, well, then you would look at that and you'd probably live a little bit differently. You probably wouldn't do everything they said to do. Mm-hmm. Because you're like, I'm not. Yeah, you're like Nero when you're fiddling when the place is about to burn. A lot of us would check out of this place, and I think a lot of us have tried to. I mean, fortunately, I think some of us, they got us. we woke up a little bit late, but we're working on it.
Well, it's better late than never, I'd say. But
for sure,
it's culture creation. That's what these people are doing. They're creating a narrative, a story, and they've placed you in it. That's mm-hmm. what it's all about, and that narrative does hinge on it. It's basically, God says it's been 6,000 years. They say it's been millions of years. It's kind of, they're inverting everything, aren't they? They're trying to push it. It's kind of, God created the heaven and earth in 7 days. No, it took a long process over billions of years of trial and error and random chance, and then it all just happened. It's kind of just saying the opposite of what the biblical truth is, and the problem is it's stupid. Like, there's no
Yeah,
justification
it's
for the
totally
story.
stupid.
It's so bad. Like, it falls apart under any real scrutiny. That they've created like an industry of like, you know, science to try and say, well, these really, really smart people who are smarter than you say it's all true. So, you know, you can try and read the work if you want, but you wouldn't understand it. It's just, you know, it's just a bunch of big long symbols and equations written on a blackboard, and it's kind of like, you just don't get the science. You know, it's kind of
Yeah, well, yeah,
it's
it makes
dark.
people. It makes like people like us are are not afraid to be called stupid by people anymore.
No.
You know, but a lot of people are obviously that's the worst thing you could call them is stupid. I mean, like that they're you're less than.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like certain people wouldn't even ever even ask questions because they want to. Well, I know the answer. You know, like you know they would rather not know the answer and not look stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny you say that, especially about like, oh, well, we've learned so much. I was actually just watching that movie. I'm a little late in the game on it, but I watched Nefarious. Have you seen that yet?
I've not seen it. No, I've heard about it.
It's actually pretty decent. I think me and Demon Racers we might actually do a review about it because obviously he does casting out of demons and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious his take on it. But there's an interesting part in the movie. Spoilers, guys, is that you know the guy is on death row and he's possessed by a demon. It's like the demon's mostly speaking through him most of the movie, and there's a time where the psychiatrist is like he's the guy. Like the plot of the movie is you have a psychiatrist who either has to say he's sane to be executed or he's insane and he's not capable. You know, they can't execute him because he's not mentally there. Um, so at one point he starts telling him he's a demon, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to go get the chaplain because this is not my area of expertise." And the demon is like recoiling. No, no, I don't want anything to do with him. And then they come in. The guy's got like a collar on. You know, looks like a Catholic type priest.
Yeah.
Comes in, and he doesn't believe in demons. He's like, "Oh no, we've learned that it's not that. This is a psychological condition," and blah blah blah. And then it's like the demon all of a sudden is like, "Oh, I should have had you come in here a long time ago." He's like, he's not afraid anymore, and he's like, "Oh, it's just, I just think it's interesting that like, yeah, that's." I thought that was a very good example of, oh, we've gotten so much smarter now,
Mm-hmm.
and the demon's just mocking them the whole time because again, you think about this is a spirit it's ancient, knows way more things. And that's what it kind of shows you in the movie, like how smart and evil the spirit is. And yeah, how smart we have become, you know, how smart we are.
I've said something similar to you before, and it's more towards, you know, like this culture that's growing and kind of grew over the last decade, big online. It's like the apologetic culture for Christians. It's kind of like trying to fit Christianity into the modern secular perspective of scientism and the way the world works. And it's kind of like the apologetics is in the word, you know, they're like apologizing for the ignorance that it seems like many Christians have. But what God really meant was this, and it actually aligns with your beliefs more so than you actually understand. You know, it's kind of this, and it's kind of the trying to, what's the word? Appease, fit in with. I'm trying to think of many ways, similes to say this, like suck up to. No, maybe not that harsh. That might be a bit harsh. Maybe not suck up to. But it's kind of like they're trying to impress the science people, the academics, you know, the learned, the well-read, the well-respected, the PhDs. You know, they're trying to be these Christians that are like on level with them. It's like, no, I'm one of the smart Christians, you know what I mean? And I'm with you guys, you know, and even though I have a faith in Christ, I can try and explain it to you in a way you can understand from the PhD smart perspective, because we're not actually backwards we're not all that primitive who don't, it's not like we all don't believe in evolution, you know, it's that kind of attitude. And it's kind of, my response is, why are you trying to impress those people? They already think you're an idiot. You're never going to change their mind. You believe in God. Straight away, they think, and their words, not mine, they think you're retarded. Like, they hate you. They think you're stupid. They think you are just an idiot. Like, you can't reason because you believe in God. Nothing you ever say to them will ever, like, get you on their side. They don't respect you. And they never will. Stop groveling for their approval and respect. Start standing strong in the word as it says it is. That's it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. And what are they going to do? Mock you? Ooh, they said some mean words. So what? Like,
right.
The
Jesus said that would happen.
The fruit's evident, you know. They're bearing terrible fruit with their philosophies and ideas. The world's falling apart. You walk upright in faith in Jesus and Christ and just preach the gospel, and you'll bear good fruit. That'll be evident to people. And you'll win. You'll win the souls in the end for Christ. Well, Christ will win the souls in the end. You know, people will be called to him, and he'll call people to him, and that's all. That's all you need to do. And it's kind of this contingent of Christians who are, like I said, trying to like grovel at the knees at the feet of the secular world today. It's kind of like, no, accept us, please. You know, I can't get on board with it. I think it's a shame.
Yeah, well, I got a friend who kind of does a little bit of that, and I know he tries real hard to show certain things in the book of Genesis that was science, but then he would deny. Obviously, he would do debates against flat earthers. He would try to get all the way around the firmament and thing in that kind of position. And then, I mean, I think some apologetics is good because I think it's like kind of like the case for Christ stuff, showing like these books were written before these events happened, and trying to just establish that the Bible is reliable.
I agree on that side of it. I do agree.
But no, I know exactly I know exactly you're talking about. That I think that, and I've told them this before. I said, you know what it says? I said, why are you debating atheists all the time? You know what the Bible says is the reason they don't believe is because they're fools, because they're wicked. You know, Psalm 14:1. The fool says in their hearts there's no God. And it even talks about it, and Paul says the same things in Romans 1. These people don't believe not because they don't have enough evidence. They've rejected the evidence because they don't want to believe. And that's the whole thing. It's like that's when my debate tactic, and I really don't like debating. It's not really my kind of my thing that I do. But what I would always do is I would always push it back on them. Okay, so why do you believe the things you believe? And then you push it till eventually you get to the point where they have to rely on some guy in a white coat. And because you put your faith in him. Okay, well, I don't trust him. I'm just going to go with my own senses, my empirical evidence. Like obviously the evidence of the Bible is historically accurate, predictions. And also, just looking around me saying, I can't imagine that this was an accident. You know, and that's why, like, I'm thinking like the debating about like stuff about the dinosaurs, and people who are Christians and they say you're doing us a disservice because you mocked the dinosaur thing, and I'm like, well, why do you believe it at all? Mm-hmm. I said it's stupid. I said, but you know why they did this? You know, like why the whole thing about the dinosaurs are here is, again, like you were saying, the Bible says the world's this old, man's this old. They'll say, here's evidence based on this fossil that it's that your Bible's wrong. So that there's a reason why they are lying about these things. And again, maybe that's why they would say they went to the moon when the Bible says, you know, like nobody's leaving this place. You know, they're saying you can go forever, and they're in their satellites and stuff. They're space telescopes that go billions of light years. Yeah, that sounds like it contradicts your Bible that says there's a firmament. And when they talk about the earth spinning, all the, like those things are calling the Bible untrue. And so, why are you trying to impress them when I think ultimately they might not like somebody like me? They'd probably call me stupid, but they would probably at least respect the fact that I'm not going to kneel to them. I'm not going to play the game as they would want to play on their side of the game, their side of the turf. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not going to accept your terms, your conditions and that's what they do. And I said, that when you kind of like say that they're telling you the truth, they've got all the cards, and obviously they can quote the other guy who proves them right. Like that is, they do a great job of regurgitating other guys' scientific studies and all the things like that. But I said, but you're not actually being respected by them by trying to, maybe soften the edges of the Bible in order to say, oh, well, maybe the Red Sea was actually caused by this phenomenon where like the wind does this and this. It's like the Bible says God's power did it. Mm-hmm. Could God use, in the same way that we were just talking about like the volcanoes? Could God use a volcano to judge a place? Sure. God could use an earthquake. He could use a hurricane. He could do anything he wants. He's God. Does he have to? No. And if the Bible doesn't say he has to, I don't need another answer. It just says God. If the Bible says that this place in Egypt, with Tanis, Egypt, I always bring this place up, Zoan was going to be judged by God, and you go there right now. Go look at pictures. It's scorched. There's megalithic stones just strewn about. They got wrecked somehow. I don't know how it happened. God did it. God said it was going to happen. That's enough.
Mm-hmm. It's not for a lot of people though. That's the issue. It's kind of they can't be happy not knowing some things. I see a lot of that. Like I've seen a lot of that even in the Christian community, and I think maybe it's a human condition thing. I myself I've learned to accept that I don't need to know everything. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That is okay not to have everything figured out 100%. And I think a lot of people struggle with that sometimes. I don't know what it is. It must be just a tendency of how maybe certain people's brains work that way. Maybe that's what it comes down to, personality type. I don't know what it is. Maybe that's the psychological explanation for all of this. But I think it takes someone being humbled, I think, to then be able to accept that they might not know something. Maybe you're not going to figure out how the universe was made. Okay? Maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't need to know the specifics of how all of creation was created and happened. But that's what science is trying to say, isn't it? We have the answers. And anyone who says anything else is an idiot. That's basically their standpoint. And they have polite, pretentious, wordy ways of saying it, but that's what they're basically saying with their belief. Like, follow the logic and reason. And but really all they have is, our best guess so far is this. Like, it's a theory. Okay, they say it's in the name. These are our theories. But they're always getting proven wrong. And then you get those people like, well, just trust the science. It's like, oh yeah, where did that get us through that event that happened from 2020 onwards? Where did trusting the science get us? It's kind of, these are just people in shiny white coats at the end of the day.
Well, it's the funny thing, we keep going back to it, is you have this very recent science, this very recent history. Like, that's like, the books don't go back that far. Mm-hmm. The science doesn't go back that far. And we have been taught since we've been kids, is there was people who were stupid who thought the earth was flat not that long ago. But meanwhile, I said, isn't it? I think it's funny, and I think a lot of people have woke up. This is one of the things that woke them up. Was, like I said, I liked watching that show, Ancient Aliens. Having a Christian background, not believing in aliens, but I still think it was really interesting. Like, well, how did they build all that stuff? And then you see all the exact dimensions of these things, how they lined them up with these constellations, how they have all these sun markers for the solstices, and how all these people knew about the stars and the constellations, the zodiac forever. And so they kind of do say, in one side of their mouth, they'll say they were very mathematical. These people were mathematically smart, but they were also really stupid. Mm-hmm. They also didn't have tools to do the things they did. Which, again, I said, it's funny, because if you think, like, if you could build something like that without really advanced tools, that means you're smarter than the people who had better tools. So you're really just saying they're not smart enough to make it easier. That's not actually, the kind of tools they have is not really how you judge somebody's intelligence.
No.
But so you have evidence throughout all of human history of people building more impressive things than we build now. So they did it somehow, and they have knowledge of, and we know, based on, again, how these things were built and why they were built, they had knowledge of math and the stars. So they kind of had the science and they had all the sciences kind of mastered back in those days. Mm-hmm. So they were never stupid. So then the conclusions I come to is, they're lying to us about all the things that they did and knew. Mm-hmm. In order for them to prop themselves up and say, look how great we are. We built this place. And now, I said, you could look back into the Little Season stuff, and it's like, yeah, people took credit for things that other people did. Mm-hmm. I said,
Absolutely.
it's interesting. I don't know if you saw it. We were talking about it on a live stream the other day. I saw an article on CNN where this, I guess these architects, or I'm not sure, architects and engineers were saying they wanted to build this 3,000 foot tall skyscraper that was literally going to be used as a battery. You heard that?
I've not heard that. No.
So it's almost like that. What a lot of us have considered is there's some of this technology was known, and then they've been re-releasing some of it as they want,
Right.
and some people are taking credit for it. But obviously now, if they're literally moving to the place where they're going to say the buildings have energy potential,
And
now we really are going into like, wow, is this like the end of whatever this is? Because it almost seems like that's what I was saying, like that a lot of people would see, oh, this idea of free energy would be presented as a godsend. But by the time the controllers or whoever you want to call them start releasing this stuff, it's kind of like the point where like they don't need to lie about the stuff anymore. They don't need us anymore.
hmm.
Like the system is going to shift based on this. And
Hmm.
but I just think it's interesting that like they're literally talking about how they're going to use skyscrapers as batteries. That's literally what you'll see in those old world shows, talking about like obelisk and certain towers
Hmm.
being the batteries for these cities.
I remember seeing images of like I think it was like some kind of Indian temple with the way all the spires are shaped on top, and it compared it
Mm-hmm.
to like the way pylons are shaped up on top of like today, and it's the exact same wires and wobbles and the same amount, and it's kind of yeah. So, but I think it would be bold of them, wouldn't it, to literally start saying, oh, well, it turns out this skyscraper we built has the potential to harness energy and be a battery. It's like you didn't know that when you designed the thing and built the thing supposedly not that long ago. You just discovered that you built something that has the potential to suck energy out of the ether. Yeah,
Well, they're not saying that yet, but they're saying that like that they can store clean energy in this thing.
interesting.
So I mean, so obviously, I think that that's obviously just one piece of whatever they would suggest how they could do it. They still might lie about how they get the energy.
Well,
I mean, but I do think it's like it lines up.
I do imagine in Satan's little season, he's going to create a time period where everything is great. Like all the evil's just been defeated. We've finally advanced or something. We defeated all these stupid religions that have been holding us back in our progression for so long. And he'll convince all the people, whoever this charismatic leader is, to all come together as one, drop the borders, and become an army, the number of the sands of the sea, let's say. You know what I mean? All these things can come into place, but to get there, a utopia probably will be created with free energy harnessing devices. But he's taking credit for the kingdom that came before, technically.
Or
You know what I mean?
what I think it might be though is like it's more like the carrot. Like we're gonna promise you this utopia, but
Right.
it'll never be like that. And
Yeah.
that's what I said. The funny part about it is it's kind of like the same way that you're shown these futures, like from since way back about like the Jetsons.
Mhm.
That there's going to be a time where the people have it so made they're going to be able to just like the robots are going to do all these things for us, and we're going to have to do anything. But we know based on the way that we're made by our creator that we need to have purpose. So like it wouldn't be a good thing if we did nothing all the time. So like what we're seeing with like AI and automation and things like that, you're pushing people out of the workforce. Then to what? And that's why they start talking about having, basic human incomes. Like, so we have to be paid to not work. And
Mhm.
then obviously once you have free energy, well, like what kind of place would that be where people like, so they're given, I guess, government housing, they're giving a check each month. And what kind of society would that be? I mean, obviously a lot of people say, I'll sign up for that right now, knowing how bad the system is, how expensive everything's getting. But, like what kind of strings come along with those incentives?
It wouldn't work with a high population. That's the issue, because you'd have too many people to feed,
Well,
and
what are
no
these?
means to produce value or income for them to then be paid fairly. It would collapse very quickly. I think they'd have to kill a lot of people.
Well, that's what you see that people they're always complaining about is that the world population is too high.
Yeah.
So they
To
they
what
they
end?
openly
Yeah.
talk about that. But again, I think it's interesting that have you ever looked into the conspiracy about like how many people actually live on Earth?
Yeah, well, if you put them all together with like I think you give them a decent amount of land each as well, wasn't it? If I remember seeing this, it wasn't just
I,
like
I've
a meter
I've only seen where
squared.
they added up all the cities, like just the populations of all the cities, and I think you only get about 2 billion people.
Yeah, and you could fit it also into like Texas, a small part of Texas, the whole
Right.
population of humanity. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
scale they did. I don't know why they chose that as a random scale, but I think in the video I saw, it's like if you put all the people together and gave them all like a meter squared or something like a meter each or something. I mean, I think it was like a decent chunk of land actually. I think it's like you give everybody like a, I don't know, 100 meter squared patch of land or something. You can actually
Mm-hmm.
fit everyone in Texas. Like all people could live there and have their own land type of thing. But obviously, like it's so dissipated, and people only live on the coasts. It's not actually as dense as you think it is on the Earth. It's not as overpopulated as they make it out to be. Is what I remember seeing. But you're saying if you
Well,
actually added it up, it's only really 2 billion people. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, no, that's what I was. That's what I've heard. It's like if you take all the major population centers of the world, and this doesn't include just the cities. It's like the suburban areas outside of these cities. You add all of the population numbers up, you only get, I think it was either 2 billion or 2.5 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we have eight in around the whole world? You'd have to conclude that you have about 6 billion people not living in cities,
Mm-hmm.
like in rural areas and
Yeah.
off the grid. Obviously, that math does not math.
No.
That makes no sense because most of the people do live in, I'm sure like you probably see like where you guys live in, like in America, the elections hinge on the big cities. Like that's what really swings these states
Yeah.
because you ever see like I know if a lot of people like in see like you obviously Republican red, Democrat blue, and you actually see how red the country is, and then but yeah, Democrats win elections because they have control of the big cities.
Mm-hmm. I
So the
remember.
world's
Yeah.
like, so that's how the world's like. So it doesn't mean like if those rural areas added up to the same amounts of the cities, then they couldn't win like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
that
they
makes sense.
do. So therefore, in America, the major cities have way more people. So yeah, so it does not, the math does not work to have 8 billion people based on the way we're taught. And so then again, always the question is, why would they lie about that? Because they're trying to pump up, they're trying to scare you about scarcity of resources. And obviously the people who control the resources can charge more for them when they're supply and demand, all the things. And
Mm-hmm.
gosh, it's one more lie. What's one more lie?
What's one more on top of the web we've already weaved, eh? Yeah, well, on that, we've gone for 2 hours, so I think it's time to wrap this up a little bit. It's been fun. As soon as we get going,
Mm-hmm.
we're off with these conversations every time, and
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. And I think people in the chat have enjoyed it too. Yeah, so is there anything you want to plug before we get going? Anything you want people to see? Like I said, I make sure to see the upcoming video on Tuesday, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. I feel like that out of all the podcasts I've done, I feel like that's probably I put a decent amount of time into the production of it. So I got like lots of pictures and overlays. But I think the subject matter. If you guys have ever looked up 536 AD, everybody says it's the worst year of human existence. You have a lot of the same opinions. I think we're the first person to come, to look at it from a biblical angle. And we even get into like the whole mythologies of Thor Ragnarok and all that kind of stuff, the crazy stuff that literally lines up with this year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you guys like any of the videos I've ever made, you guys will like this one. Cause of course, and again, we have Alpha Talks. Everybody loves Alpha Talks because he's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to these kind of topics too. So I got him on there, and yeah, it's coming out Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, please guys check that out.
Absolutely. I'll leave the links down below. As soon as you schedule it, I'll post it in this video description down here if they're watching by this point. If unless Tuesday's already passed, if it's what is it? It's just gone Monday for me now. So yeah, tomorrow technically for me. But yeah, I'll leave all the links. Obviously, guys, subscribe to Joe and his channel. I'll leave the link in the description as well. Thanks for being here, everyone. I think it's been a good one. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for all the new subscribers, 70,000. Let's see if we can hit 100,000 by the end of the year at this rate. Maybe. That'd be Let's see what happens. Fingers crossed. But I'll be bringing more shows soon. I've got lots of live shows coming up. I just literally did one before this one, which I'll be releasing when he releases it as well. A very short one, 40 minutes it was. Do you know how hard it is to squeeze in the Nephilim like clowns in 40 minutes? Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting good at it. I'm condensing the ideas down. And get this, at the last 3 minutes, he said, I have 3 minutes left. But I hear you've been talking about this little season thing. Can you just give us a quick overview of what that's about? And I'm like, in 3 minutes. Okay. And I do a quick 3 minute boom elevator pitch. This is what it is. Take of it what you will. And then he's like, thanks for that. Thanks for your time. And it cuts out because he ran out of time and he hasn't paid for Zoom. So we got it just in time.
Nice.
But yeah, that's coming out soon anyway, guys. Thanks for being here. Make sure to obviously subscribe to the guest channel. Links down below. I'll be back soon with more videos. And just God bless.
God bless.
At first, I just thought people couldn't financially justify hiring a clown anymore, you know? Then I started blaming the media for portraying my people as bloodthirsty murderers, cult members, or man-eating space aliens. Of course, the 2016 clown sightings didn't help. Ronald was the first to go. They just took him away. And we stayed silent. Because that's when the book appeared. What new form of clown bigotry was this, I thought? Hadn't my people suffered enough? My clown act was failing because people just weren't taking it seriously. And once they fired me from the circus, I tried suing them for funfair dismissal. My unicycle rusted, and my balls gathered dust. I used to make kids scream with laughter, you know. So much that I could see the tears of joy running down their faces. And then it just stopped. I was so upset that I started eating the banana cream pies instead of throwing them in people's faces. I gained so much weight that summer. I avoided it for a while, but the book's front cover was just so eye-catching, and it was so readily available on Amazon that I gave in and finally read the thing. I didn't even know what the Nephilim were. Luckily, the author spent the first half of the book concisely explaining the biblical history to me in an easy-to-understand manner, so that wasn't really a problem for long. That's when I read the rest of the book and realized that being a clown is no joke.
It's a good thing, but yeah, like to try to really explain like why we believe the things Jesus said, we have just a mountain of scriptures to